All right. Anything else? What's the nicest thing anyone has ever done for you that comes to your memory? No one's done anything nice to anybody here. How sad. Nothing? Huh? Okay. I don't know who did the nice thing. Okay, a child was born. Okay, anything else? Nothing ever? No one's ever done anything nice for you? Like a random stranger buying you a meal, or, like stuff like that happens on occasion, doesn't it? Wow. All right. I have to pray that God blesses you guys more with people showing you favor. Regardless, it's something to keep in the back of your mind, because we're actually going to talk about one particular character in particular, and just how God uses him in this story, right? So we've been in the story of Joseph, and actually for the next couple chapters, I'm going to have to go through 2 chapters. All of a sudden, the main character shifts significantly, okay? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So we are going to look at Genesis 43 and 44 today. 2 long chapters. I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. Open up your Bibles, open up your smartphones, or look at the screen above. Genesis 43. Where the Lord says this: Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little more food." But Judah said to him, "The man warned us solemnly, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother along with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. Because the man said to us, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you.' Israel asked, 'Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother?' They replied, 'The man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family. Is your father still living?' he asked. 'Do you have another brother?' We simply answered his questions. How were we to know he would say, 'Bring your brother down here'?" Then Judah said to Israel his father, "Send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. As it is, if we had not delayed, we could have gone and returned twice." Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bag and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also and go back to the man at once, and may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved." So the men took the gifts and doubled the amount of silver, and Benjamin also. They hurried down to Egypt and presented themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my house. Slaughter an animal and prepare a meal. They are to eat with me at noon." The man did as Joseph told him and took the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were frightened when they were taken to his house. They thought, "We were brought here because of the silver that was put back into our sacks the first time. He wants to attack us and overpower us and seize us as slaves and take our donkeys." So they went to Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance to the house. "We beg your pardon, our lord," they said. "We came down here the first time to buy food. But at the place where we stopped for the night, we opened our sacks, and each of us found his silver, the exact weight, in the mouth of his sack. So we have brought it back with us. We have also brought additional silver with us to buy food. We don't know who put our silver in our sacks." "It's all right," he said. "Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver." Then he brought Simeon out to them. The steward took the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided fodder for their donkeys. They prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon, because they had heard that they were to eat there. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts that they had brought into the house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. He asked them how they were, and then he said, "How is your aged father you told me about? Is he still living?" They replied, "Your servant, our father, is still alive and well." And they bowed down, prostrating themselves before him. As he looked about and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, "Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. After he had washed his face, he came out and, controlling himself, said, "Serve the food." They served him by himself, the brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because Egyptians could not eat with Hebrews, for that is detestable to Egyptians. The men had been seated before him in the order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at each other in astonishment. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's, so they feasted and drank freely with him. Now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house: "Fill the men's sack with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain." And he did as Joseph said. As morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, "Go after those men at once, and when you catch up with them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from, and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done.'" When he caught up with them, he repeated these words to them. But they said to him, "Why does my Lord say such things? For far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouths of our sacks. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servant is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my Lord's slave." "Very well, then," he said. "Let it be as you say. Whoever is found to have it will become my slave. The rest of you will be free from blame." Each of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this they tore their clothes. Then they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, What is this you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination?" "What can we say to my Lord?" Judah replied. "What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my Lord's slaves, we ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup." But Joseph said, "Far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you, go back to your father in peace." Then Judah went up to him and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak a word to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. My lord asked his servants, 'Do you have a father or a brother?' And we answered, 'We have an aged father, and there is a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him.' Then you said to your servants, 'Bring him down to me so I can see him for myself.' And we said to my lord, 'The boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die.' But you told your servants, 'Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again.' When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him what my lord had said. Then our father said, 'Go back and buy a little more food.' But we said, 'We cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go. We cannot see the man's face unless your youngest brother is with us.' Your servant, my father, said to us, 'You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them went away from me, and I said, he has surely been torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and harm comes to him, you will bring my gray head down to the grave of misery. So now if the boy is not with us when I go back to your servant my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't here, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, if I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please let your servant remain here as a Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? Do not let me see the misery that would come on my father. Amen. Long passage, story that you're familiar with, but this is a big turning point in the story. Right? We've been going through the story of Joseph. We've been seeing how he's really the product of many different things. So in the beginning, generational sin put him in the position where his brothers were envious, so much so that they wanted to first kill him, but instead they sold him as a slave. Right? But the generational blessings that had passed down from his forefathers allowed him to succeed wherever he was placed. So much so that he rose up from slavery to being equal to Pharaoh. But then we also saw last week that the fulfillment, these promises, these desires that God gives us are not always seen in our generation, and often passes to the generations that are to come. And so we're seeing that Joseph is fulfilling not just his dreams, but also the dreams of his father and his father's fathers. And here we see his brother Judah rise up. That's the story of chapter 43 and chapter 44. There's a new character that kind of takes center stage, and it's Judah. Now, if you remember from last week, if you put yourselves in the shoes of Jacob, he was upset, he was frustrated, he was disappointed in his entire family, right? The only son that he cared about was gone. And so the only other son he cared about, he was trying to protect as much as he possibly could. The rest of his sons, he didn't really care for. And there's good reason. Because when you look at what they did, Reuben the eldest did something very stupid. Slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine, to kind of exert his own authority. That disqualified him. And we saw last week also, Reuben was not a very worthy character. He was not a worthy person to take leadership of the family. We saw Simeon and Levi in Genesis 34. They killed an entire city. These guys are crazy. They tricked them. They're like, hey, if you want to marry our sister, you got to get circumcised. And they all got circumcised, and while they were recovering, these two guys showed up and killed an entire city. Right? They totally bushwhacked them. But anyway, Judah himself, we saw right after the story of Joseph, we see that Judah himself has a very kind of not so great past. Judah himself, he's pretty old. He has his own sons who have their own sons, so he's already a grandpa, right? But one of the things that he did that he didn't do honorably was that his eldest son passed away. And by Jewish tradition, you're supposed to take care of the daughter-in-law. You're supposed to marry her off to your next son, which he did. But then his next son wasn't a very responsible person either, because actually you're supposed to impregnate the daughter-in-law so that the family line continues. So that son would actually get the inheritance of his first son. But that didn't happen. So then God kills off that son too. And so this daughter-in-law was not being taken care of, so she tricks Judah into thinking that she's a temple prostitute. He sleeps with her, gets her pregnant, finds out later that she's a prostitute, and wants to kill her until he realizes that he's the father. Right? Very messed up story. But he realizes that she was teaching him a lesson, that he was being irresponsible. It was actually his job to protect her as his daughter-in-law. He didn't do that. I summarized a very long story for you right there. Anyway, so what we have here is, up until this point, Jacob has good reason to be disappointed in his family. They have all failed him. But now Judah will rise. Now, if we go back to the last story, they came back, they bring this food, and Jacob is like, I will not send my son, I will not send Benjamin with you guys. And so he just kind of acts like nothing happens. And they eat food. And then the food runs out. We don't know how much time passed. If you kind of estimate, I think it takes about 1 week from where they were in Canaan to Egypt, one way. And when Judah says we could have gone back twice, that if you want to estimate it from what he says, that might be about a month. Some people think it might be actually 2 years, because we know for a fact that now they're 2 years into the famine. So some people think the first trip was the beginning of the famine, and now we're 2 years later. Regardless, whether it's 1 month or 2 years, that's a pretty long time to leave Simeon in jail, right? Right? You leave your brother behind, he's in jail, you're just eating food. Like, hey, we're out of food. Hey, go buy some more. It's like they kind of just didn't care about Simeon, like, honestly. Like, it really sucked to be him. Regardless, time has passed. But Jacob, as you can tell, by the simple fact that he says, go and buy food, he is not right in the head. And he is not willing to do the right thing in this situation. So in this case, Judah calls him out. Judah is the one who speaks up, and Judah is the one who says, do you understand what you're doing, Father? We can't go without Benjamin. So either send Benjamin with us, or we will all just die of starvation here together. But I will take responsibility. If you send Benjamin with me, I will bring him back. This is on me. Now, if we look back at the last chapter, Reuben tried to say something similar, but Reuben was like, hey, if I don't bring Benjamin back, you can kill my sons. What? What is that? Whereas Judah, he's actually taking responsibility himself. He's like, if I mess this up, this is on me. He takes responsibility, and he rebukes his father. And he corrects his father. And his father finally gets right in the head and says, you know what, you're right. And in fact, you should bring back double the silver, and bring some of our nice stuff like pistachios and almonds and the niceties of Canaan, right? I guess if it was Korea, you would bring back like kimchi or something like that. Whatever local pleasantry there is. And so you're starting to see a shift in this character of Judah. And he's willing to put his own neck on the line, unlike Reuben. So in this section, now Jacob says, while he's replying to them in verse 14, he talks about the Almighty, El Shaddai, the Lord Almighty. This is a very ancient name for God, actually. It's most commonly used in the book of Job. There's, I think, something like 30-something instances of this word, and most of them are in the book of Job. But interestingly enough, in Genesis, every time God revealed himself to the generations, he always called himself the Almighty. Both to Abraham in Genesis 17, Isaac in Genesis 28, and even to Jacob. When Jacob has this encounter with God, he calls himself El Shaddai, the Almighty. And so every time God has claimed this name for himself, he is actually renewing the promises that he has made from generation to generation. And so Jacob is now invoking the name of El Shaddai and saying, may El Shaddai bless you. May the God of promise keep that promise that he always gave to us. Now you have to note that Jehovah or Yahweh, the name that is the personal name of God, hasn't yet been revealed to them. That happens later in Exodus, right, with Moses. So it's very interesting that in this one moment, Jacob remembers who God is, and he declares, may El Shaddai bless you. And so then Joseph, honestly, I don't really know what Joseph's motivations were. I don't know how much of this was rightfully done, or how much of this was just him wanting to get revenge on his brothers. I don't know. It's hard to say because the Bible doesn't really clearly state what his intentions were, but he really does mess with their heads. They show up, he's like, all right guys, kill the calf, we're going to have a feast. It's like, what? We're not even your friends. Our brother's in jail. We're gonna have a barbecue. It's like, get some samgyeopsal already. And they're like, what's going on? And then when they ask about the silver, they're like, oh yeah, we got that already. Don't worry about it. Like, what? He's like messing with their heads. And then he's the one who arranges how they seat. They never talk to him. And they sit down and they're like, hey, we're sitting by age. Like, what's going on? Totally messing with their heads. And then Benjamin, this young boy, he's actually not young. I think Benjamin was probably in his mid-30s at this point. He's not a young guy. But anyway, Benjamin gets 5 times the food. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't care how small the portion is. 5 times is a very large portion more. I think maybe Sangwon's the only one who could eat 5 times more than other people. But it's that would get your attention, right? If you're sitting at a table and someone has 5 times more food than you. And he continues. They get ready to go home. He puts the silver back in again, right? The second time, and then he puts in this cup. And he claims that this cup is his divination cup. Now, divination, what that means is there were different types of divination back then, oleomancy, hydromancy. Basically, all that was they would pour either water into oil or oil into water, and they would look at it and look at the patterns and tell the future from them. That's what divination was. That's what a divination cup meant, right? Now, obviously, Joseph didn't use divination. When we look at the previous passages, he always says only God can do this. Obviously, he's messing with them, right? And he's kind of making them think that because of his divination, he knew that they were lying, right? I don't know why he's doing this. Maybe we can ask. We have 2 Josephs here. Maybe you guys know. But regardless, he's doing these things and it's really messing with them. And then they find the cup in Benjamin's sack, and all of a sudden, they're in a situation where Benjamin is being demanded as a slave. Even though they said they would all become his slaves, he says, I just want Benjamin. So basically, Joseph has done 2 different things. The first time, he gave them 2 different tests. The first test was, he took Simeon away from them, he gave them food, and he gave them their money back. And the first test was, are they going to come back? Or are they just going to leave Simeon and just take the food and the money and run? They kind of did for a long time. I think they sort of failed that test a little bit, honestly. And then the second test. Now that they've come again, and now Benjamin has allegedly been found guilty, will they leave him there behind? And there's no way they can prove his innocence. That's the second test. And this is where they actually pass. Now, Judah passes this test, and I'm going to explain why. So, now first off, you have to remember that Judah was the very one who, when Joseph was being sold, he was the one who came up with the idea, hey guys, let's not kill him, let's sell him for money. Right? That was his brilliant idea. So if you really think about it, Judah was the one that Joseph probably hated the most. Because his last memory of Judah was him coming up with a brilliant idea of selling him into slavery. Right? Granted, they didn't kill him, but still, that's Joseph's last memory of Judah, that's the brother that decided that I should be a slave. That's the brother that wanted to sell me for money. That's his last memory. But the interesting thing is, Judah, with the long speech that he gives, now you have to remember, he doesn't know who Joseph is. He thinks this is the ruler of Egypt. He's scared. He is terrified. And yet he gives this very long, very personal, very eloquent speech, which is actually the very longest in Genesis. The longest personal speech in all of Genesis, he proclaims for the sake of his own brother. And really for the sake of his own father. Now he could have gone and said that, we didn't take the silver, it ended up back in our bag, we never took the cup, because that was true. But he doesn't do that. If anything, he accepts what has happened. He is not denying it. But what he does that sets him apart from all of his brothers, he says, I will take his place. He is guilty. You have every reason to take him as your slave, but I will offer you a reason why I will take his place. He's the first person in the Bible to do this. We of course know that Jesus does this for us, but Judah is the first person to willingly choose to be a sacrifice for someone else. Now, you look at the story of Isaac, and Isaac was called to be a sacrifice for Abraham. Isaac didn't volunteer, right? He's like, hey Dad, where are we going? We go to campfire? Okay. Put that knife down. like, Isaac was not a volunteer. Even Joseph himself was not a volunteer. Joseph never chose to go through the suffering that he did. But Judah is the first character in the Bible that willingly says, take me instead. I will willingly sacrifice my life for the sake of my family. He's come a long way. And so really, in this story, you have two Christ figures. Like I said, Joseph is the innocent, suffering servant. He's the one who's constantly having to endure more and more intense suffering and is able to rise up. In that sense, he is an image of Christ. But in the same way, Judah is an image because he's the one who chooses to take the place of another who is guilty. So the question is, who actually gets exalted more? Joseph or Judah? What do you guys think? Who ends up the quote-unquote hero of the story? Joseph or Judah? It's Judah, right? Because if you look, Joseph gets the double portion. What I mean by that is, when you look at the tribes of Israel, there is no tribe of Joseph. It's actually the tribe of his two sons. So his two sons, was it Ephraim and Manasseh? They both have the same level of inheritance. So it's like Joseph himself gets a double portion. But Judah is a line of kings. All the kings come from the line of Judah. Right? What do you think is more important? Getting the double portion or being the line of kings? Jesus himself comes from the line of Judah. Right? So what you see here is both of them exemplify Christ in their lives. And honestly, Judah really just does it for a very short period in his life. The rest of his life, he was a jerk. But in this very brief moment, he rises up. But he is the one who actually is honored more in history. Joseph was awesome, but Judah became the line of kings. And so what we see from this story is that choosing to be like Christ in any given moment, it's a choice. Judah made a choice. Joseph was put into difficult circumstances and he responded well. But Judah made the choice to be like Christ. That's the main thing I want you to get from the story, or this particular section, is that when you want being like Christ, it's always a choice. Granted, God will sanctify you, God will build you up so that making this choice becomes slightly easier, but at the end of the day, it's still a choice. So like the story of Judah, Judah was not a man of high character. He had done a lot of stupid and terrible things. And yet, when he made that choice, that's what redeemed him. That's what put him in a place of honor. And so brothers and sisters, making that decision to be Christ-like has nothing to do with who you are or what you've done in the past. It's about making the choice in that moment. So the question is, will you choose to be Christ? To be a Christ to someone when that moment comes? It could happen tomorrow. It could happen many years from now. But the question is, are you willing to make that choice? Are you willing to choose to sacrifice for the sake of someone else? And what we see from this is, immediately after this chapter, this is when Joseph breaks down. All of a sudden, he can't keep the charade up anymore, and he just says, you know what? I'm Joseph. Surprise! Right? So Joseph responds in that same way. When we make that choice to be like Christ, God responds. Doesn't necessarily mean things are going to turn out the way you think they are. Usually it's better, honestly. But God responds when we're willing to make those choices. And so for the very simple question I have is, will we rise as Judah rose? When those moments in our lives come, when we can be a Christ to someone else, are we willing to take that step? Now, the word rise for me is always a little bit colored because of the movie Dark Knight Rises. Like, every time I see that word, I always hear rise. With like that music playing in the background. I don't know. I gotta stop watching that movie. But that's the question I want to pose to you guys today. Are we willing to rise when those moments occur? When it doesn't matter about what we've done. It doesn't matter about who we are. It's about being Christ in that moment. That's the challenge that we have. Could be something small, could be something really big. I don't know. Now, you have to understand that Judah, this didn't happen immediately. It took him many years to kind of change his character. And this is really what I think Joseph was testing. Are these brothers the same evil people that I knew of before, or have they really changed? And the moment that he sees that change, it wrecks him. Because he knows God has been moving in his brothers. And he responds to that. So the question is, are we willing to respond? Are we willing to allow God's direction to change us in the way that we can choose to be a Christ as well? So with that, let's take the time to pray, and then we'll go ahead and close. Let's just take a moment to just